This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
So some of you might wonder what Greg Bedard does during the bye week. Apparently, the answer is write one of the longest stories in the history of Boston Sports Journal regarding Robert Kraft and Jerod Mayo and Mayo's past, present, and future, and what it looks like. We're going to get into that story today, but first, I remind you, the Prize Picks app, use code CLNS, get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, our friends at Game Time, don't forget about them. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. All right, before we get into Greg's ginormous story about Jerod Mayo, we have some other things to talk about. KJ Osborn, Greg, just about 90 minutes ago or so, was released. I have a couple of questions for you regarding this release. The first question is, why now?
Great question. I think it's because they're looking at the they're looking at the final 4 games of the season. Here they are. They know they're not going anyplace. And, they're not going to play him. He hasn't played in a while. And they have 2 guys, Cole Strange probably first, and then Caden Wallace second. We'll see whether he's up this week. They just opened up the 21-day window on him coming back. I would assume that he would be back more the following week because it's been a while since he's been in pads. Then again, they just threw Christian Barmore out there after not even having a padded practice. So would it be a shock to see Caden Wallace out there this week? No. They need the roster spots. Everything that we've seen recently, with releases and things like that, whether it's like a guy like Michael Jordan, what have you, basically what they're doing is, are they part of our future plans or not? KJ Osborn was on a 1-year deal. He's obviously not part of their future plans. So let's get a look at some kids who could be in our future plans.
About those kids, I wanted to ask you, does this tell us that Jalen Polk and Javon Baker are going to play more in the final month? I'm not sold on that, and I'll tell you why. KJ Osborn has been a healthy and active, and Baker is still barely getting on the football field, and Jalen Polk is a lot of times being used as a run blocker more than receiver. Should we anticipate more snaps from those 2 guys starting this weekend, or slow the roll? The KJ Osborn move is more about, like you just mentioned, Wallace and Cole Strange.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the individual games, Nick, I think they're going to still take the approach of, what's the best personnel, what's the best path to win this game, and I think that's going to depend on the week and their approach to each team that they take on. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Kendrick Bourne, Booty, and Douglas are probably still going to lead the way in terms of wide receiver snaps down the stretch, and then sort of Polk and Baker after that. If I were the coaching staff of the Patriots, I would have used the bye week to say, okay, Baker's Baker. We all know he's sort of in his own special category in terms of where he was entering the league and maturity issues. And we've seen he's had issues on the field. They should have made the bye week a priority of like, all right, how do we get Jalen Polk going? And I'm hopeful that we see that down the stretch.
Final thing about KJ Osborn, of course, he was one of the free agents that Elliott Wolf brought into town during the offseason. And when you look at the free agents from that offseason, you've got Osborn. Obviously, we would say he was a fail, did nothing. Chukwuekorfor, I don't know if you agree with this, Greg. I feel differently about Chooks than a lot of other people. And maybe it's just my own personal situation in life, dealing with, mental health and things like that. I know Phil Perry had said it was a mental health thing with Chooks and something was going on. So I don't really hold that against Elliott because I don't know if you can predict that. But, you got the Chukwuekorfor. If you want to kill him for that, certainly you can kill him. Armon Watts was cut. He didn't work out. Nick Leverett, I think, is another contextual conversation to have because he's actually a guard. They pushed him to center because the Jake Andrews injury after the David Andrews injury, of course. You had Jake Andrews surprisingly get hurt before you got to camp, and then David Andrews. So Leverett was kind of thrown into a situation where he wasn't comfortable. I wonder if that would have worked out differently. Sione Taki has not worked out. Jacoby Brissett, I think, was worse than we expected. Antonio Gibson, I think, has been very good and deserves the football more. Jalen Hawkins started off pretty good, but he's fallen off. Not really much of anything to write about with him. Austin Hooper, I think all of us would say, was a good job by Wolf, and he has worked out. Overall, how do you feel about the free agency class?
Not great. When it comes to criticizing Elliott Wolf, and we'll get into that once the season's over, and I've maintained all along, like I need to see the full 17 games. I mean, because, who knows who pops down the stretch. It's not unusual for, when a new coaching regime takes over, you have, especially on offense, you have an entirely new system and a bunch of new coaches. It's not unusual at all for it to take time, at least like half a season before things really start to gel for people. And so, I need to see the finished product. To me, this is the most disappointing aspect of Wolf's tenure to this point, his one off season. The draft, I know a lot of people, and Nick, I know we're of similar minds on this. I mean, people are losing their minds about the draft. Again, outside of the first round, I don't expect much from draft picks. You would like them to grab some sort of role, and you could say a guy like Polk hasn't. But right. I still think the potential is there for this draft, and I'm not judging them off of a half a season, 3/4 of a season. I still think, well, obviously, I still think Polk is going to be a good player. Layden Robinson is a good player. I think Caden Wallace is going to be a serviceable, at least backup swing tackle in this league whenever he gets on the field. Consistently, Baker was a pick I wouldn't have made. A guy like Marcellus Dial, good special teams type guy late in the draft. That's what you're hoping for. Joe Milton, I think, has a lot of potential and could be a future lottery ticket for the Patriots down the line. So I'm fine with the draft. I'm not overreacting to the draft. But the free agency, Nick, I didn't mind their approach. I know a lot of people are up in arms. They should have spent more. They should have done X, Y, and Z. I get all that, but I didn't at the time. And we, with the benefit of hindsight, we can all be correct. But, after seeing what they did, I didn't mind it. I thought that it was very much like something like Belichick would have done, going into 2001. After he came on in 2000, they won 5 games. They went to free agency and they found a bunch of like role type players, under the radar, cheaper, that sort of thing. And right. I thought that's what the Patriots were doing. They were like, they weren't sure about like Jonah Williams, who hasn't played for the Cardinals, as sort of the big quote unquote offensive tackle in this free agent class. And they identified people, and I didn't disagree with it. Like KJ Osborn has been a good, productive number 3 wide receiver in this league. Chukwuekorfor on film showed that he did have the potential to play left tackle in this league. Armon Watts was a defensive tackle who, they just brought him in to be sort of like a third defensive tackle, help against the run type of guy. Didn't disagree with that. Taki's been a good linebacker in this league, has been with a lot of the coaches in Cleveland that came here. Brissett, I think he did about what they thought he was going to do. I mean, maybe he was a little bit worse throwing the ball, but then again, look at the protection. It was the first month of a brand new scheme for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's fair.
He was sort of a sacrificial lamb. I mean, remember, he has delivered 2 of the Patriots' victories so far. Like you said, Gibson, I think he's been really good. Hawkins, that was one of those under the radar type of things where they're like, all right, well, we think we identified a guy who can be better here than he has been before. And Hooper, I think, has been good. I just think that, none of those guys, that they're going to get to the end of the season and Osborn, Okorafor, Watts, and Leverett aren't going to be on the team anymore, there's nothing else you can say is other than that's just a failure. It's a failure. Those guys needed to help this team. They're veterans, they're professional, and that they're not even on this team anymore. Some of them, like Leverett, is circumstances. I think that when they signed him, they saw a guard deficit, but then they got Layden Robinson and Michael Jordan started off pretty good. And so, he got passed a little bit by some other people, which they didn't foresee, but they needed it, that they didn't spend a lot of money on those guys. They really needed them to grab roles on this team, and they just didn't. And so, to me, that's a fail from Elliott Wolf.
All right, let's get to the latest with Bill Belichick in the University of North Kakalaka. A lot of stuff coming out the last few days. As a matter of fact, 40 seconds ago, people are posting on Twitter that Belichick's girlfriend is now following UNC Chapel Hill, UNC football, UNC _FB nutrition on Instagram. There's just so many things happening. But let's give you the latest legitimate info here on this. And this comes from Ollie Connolly from The Guardian. He's been all over this story. And he posted about an hour ago. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon before Greg has to go serve his penance with Felger and Mass for a couple of hours. So, look, Belichick might be North Carolina's head coach or be ruled out by the time this podcast comes out. But here's where we are. This is what Conley posted. Belichick has agreed to become the next UNC coach. So there you go. Belichick wants to be the head coach. He has agreed to coach there. It's now in UNC's hands. Belichick handed the school a 400-page organizational Bible with structure, payment plan, staffing choices, etc., decisions on whether to commit with UNC. He is expected to know their decision within 24 hours. So Belichick has said yes. He's waiting for North Carolina to say yes or no within the next 24 hours. Again, this was posted about 11:30 in the morning on Tuesday. Belichick's Bible would require historic levels of investment from the school, includes salary minimums, position by position, and a willingness to hire not one, but two staffs, a coaching staff run by Belichick and a recruitment staff run by a sitting college GM. The sitting college GM, Greg, would require a buyout. Belichick has a college and pro version of his updated manual and has shared it with other schools and NFL teams. But he drafted a new one specific to UNC that touched on every aspect of the program and school. Will need to be signed off by the AD, chancellor, trustees, and boosters. And Conley finishes by writing, there's already been pushback from the group of 13 trustees with input from wider faculty. The investment would overhaul the school's approach to football. And here's what you've been waiting for. Belichick is unsure if the school will meet the demands and ... is unwilling to negotiate. No, you're telling me that Bill is throwing this Bible on the desk and saying, this is exactly what you need to do for me to be the head coach. And if you want to change one single word of this damn thing, I'm out. Not surprising to read that. Overall, Greg, I just gave you the latest. Your thoughts on Belichick, North Carolina, and what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I know this is I understand that this would be a popular talk radio subject around here, but, to what I do covering the Patriots, it doesn't really register with me. So I haven't been following this very closely. My number one reaction, I don't know if you can guess what it is, especially hearing about the Belichick's dossier, is can we see Jerod Mayo's plan? How many pages was Jerod Mayo's plan when he took over the Patriots? I think
it was more of a pamphlet.
But to me, this is all about, I think Belichick has certainly tested the waters in terms of NFL jobs. And I think that he feels that there won't be a chair there for him when the music stops. And so he really wants to get back into coaching. I don't know what his staff is going to look like. I guess we could figure like a guy like Matt Patricia will probably go with him. I don't see Josh McDaniels going with him. I don't know.
Hold on. Let's have some fun, okay? Let's do this quickly.
Okay.
Defensive coordinator. If Bill gets the job, is it Patricia?
Yes.
Offensive coordinator.
Could be Ben McDaniels, Josh's brother.
Oh, brother Ben. Hello, brother Ben. This one's fun to me because there could be a lot of answers for this. Who's the GM with the buyout?
I'm just guessing. I have no information on this, but I could see. Could you see a Joe Judge there, considering he's been in the college game for the past year and has been through the college game? He just got retained by Ole Miss, but could he jump to be Bill's GM? I could see that.
How about Patricia GM, Steven Belichick, defensive coordinator, ready to take over for Dad when Bill Belichick says goodbye?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if that's part of anything. I would be surprised if North Carolina agrees to that, but I guess you can't rule it out. And then again, Steve could really like the Pacific Northwest. I mean, I know when I've been up there, I've loved it. University of Washington is an awesome campus, an awesome place. I wonder if he just stays put where he is. Maybe it could it be Brian Belichick? Could Brian say, I've had enough of Jerod Mayo after 1 year and jumping over with Dad? Then again, I think he's here because of family obligations in terms of, I think his wife is from here. And look, this is basically the only place he and they have ever known. So I understand, certainly understand choosing family over a specific job and being able to have roots.
Couple things. Number one, Belichick would look at Patricia and say he's got to be the GM because, as we know, with Belichick's revisionist history, it was Matt Patricia who built the entire Detroit Lions offensive line. Also, you could look at the Bill Belichick, Steve Belichick succession plan. Bill could say, "Hey, I learned something from Robert Kraft. He had that in the contract for Mayo. Let's do the same thing for my son. So let's do that for Steven." How about those ideas? All right. Speaking of Mayo, we've got to get to Greg's ginormous story. We've got to get to the sit down Mayo had with Tom Curran. But before we get to that, Greg knows that you need to know all about Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 200 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. I love sitting down for a game, whether it's Monday night or Thursday night, and we're actually going to have Wednesdays coming up here. That's on right. Christmas, and I love sitting down, going on Prize Picks. I know there's a lot of people who go between a bunch of games and stuff like that. I am one of these. I need to concentrate on the game I'm watching, so I love picking a couple guys from each team and seeing if my prediction comes true. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December. I love those free picks. And they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pixmas. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, before we get to, and I'm not blowing smoke up my man's skirt here, but before we get to Greg's Jerod Mayo story, which I thought was tremendous. It's long, so if you want to sit down,
I didn't even realize it was long. You said it like
felt
3
long.
times. I guess
maybe it felt long. It felt a little long to me, but
I wrote it in like 3 different installments. I wrote it like before the weekend, during the weekend, and then after the weekend. Like that's the type of story that you accumulate certain nuggets over the course of time. You figure out when is it time. Bye week, heading out of the bye week. I thought it was time.
That's what I said to Kelly. I said to Kelly this morning, if anybody was wondering what Greg does during the bye week, it is putting together this story. But I say that because it could be a long read for some people, but it's well worth it. Trust me. You want to read this in its entirety. I tweeted out one of the more revealing lines within the story, but I also followed up that tweet by saying, I urge everyone to read the entire story, because a lot of people were sending me questions on Twitter that Greg answers within the body of the story. So check it all out. But before we get to that piece by Greg, Tom Curran sat down with Mayo last week. And Tom, of course, does a great job with his podcast. And he was sitting down with Mayo for an exclusive. And just two things out of that interview, Greg, I want to ask you about. Jerod mentioned this, year two bump. And this is something that he has kept going back to, that, I'm going to learn from this year. And during the offseason, I'm going to look back and see what I did wrong. And things are going to be good. And we're going to be all set. Your thoughts on a year two bump with Jerod Mayo?
I mean, I don't disregard that possibly happening. To me, I hate that just line of thinking, or at least speaking it out loud during a season. And I think we've talked about this before, because this is not the first time he's done it. I mean, I think he did it around the midpoint of the season as well. And, I just put myself in the place of the players, especially say guys who are going into free agency, stuff like that. And you're like, year two, like, what about this year? What about this week? Like, why are you already thinking about year two? How about you just worry about the game in front of you? Take a page out of Bill Belichick's handbook, where he's just worried about, think about next year. It's all about the next game. I think that to me, as a coach, you are doing a disservice to your players who are going out there and risking injury and their future every week if you're even speaking or thinking about next year.
Yeah.
Worry about getting better in the there's no reason why you can't get better game to game. That's how we judge players. I mean, if Jalen Polk stunk for half the season, but all of a sudden, or say he stunk up to now, but all of a sudden Jalen Polk is putting in the work. He's like, I'm going to be better. And then in the final 4 games, all of a sudden he catches, 15 passes, like 3 touchdowns over the final 4 weeks, 15, 20 passes or whatever. You're like, okay, now we got something. Like, I'm not just waiting for Jalen Polk to hit it next year. I'm waiting for him now to do something. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just me, the way I'm made, but like him talking about next year and talking himself up and how he's going to be better in the offseason for next year does not sit well with me.
I take it as he doesn't have a lot to point to as far as what's happened far this year and what's going on presently. So I kind of go back to the political world. Nobody get triggered about this, okay? Cupcakes. Let's not get triggered. Because people might, politicians do one of two things when they're running for office. And I think we saw that in this last presidential election, and we've seen it in a lot of presidential elections, and we've seen it in a lot of elections all over the country forever. You sell one of two things, Greg. Yep. You either sell people on hope, or you sell people on fear. Right? This idea of things are going to get worse. Things aren't going to get better. Things are terrible right now. You should fear the future if you don't vote for me. Or I have the vision of what this can be, and we can all come together and hold hands and have marshmallow s'mores and enjoy the world. You either sell hope or fear. And I think Jerod Mayo, because of what's played out this year, he's selling hope. Hey, look, I'm going to get better. I'm going to sit down during the offseason. I'm going to look back at my mistakes, and I am going to correct those mistakes, and everything's going to be great. Vote for Jerod Mayo 2025. That's kind of how I feel, why he's doing this and why he's saying this kind of stuff. Just my
Nick, it's an excellent point. I'm probably going to steal some of it for Felger and Maz today.
Just give me credit, Greg. Give me credit.
I'm going to twist it a little because then I can take credit for it if I twist it a little. What's the old saying? Either you run on your record or you run on hope. And Jerod Mayo has no record to run on. When you talk about why people should believe in him, how have you proven that you're a capable head coach for this organization? He has nothing to run on, which is, what we'll really be talking about when we talk about my story. And so he's talking about a future where he's much better. Yep. And sorry, I don't I don't believe in those things. I don't believe in hope. And we've said this before, and we've said this in relation to the Patriots and some of Jerod Mayo's plans for this year. Hope is not a plan. Hope is a dream. Hope is a fantasy to me. I like to deal with reality. And what I like to see is a first-year head coach. We've talked about it all year. I want to see a first-year head coach show improvement. I'm not even talking wins and losses. Like, show me that you're getting better. Like, for example, the Carolina Panthers and Dave Canales, who for half the season, they looked like the worst team in the league. They were a joke. They were going, benching Bryce Young, Andy Dalton. Bryce Young's back in. Those guys, they've won 2 of their last 5 games. The other 3 against the Chiefs, the Eagles, and I want to say the Bucks, all close games. You know how Jerod Mayo said, we want to be the team that teams don't want to face, that they want to, we want to be a pain in the ass to those teams. That's the Panthers. It ain't the Patriots. And so Jerod Mayo really doesn't have any record to run on, so he has to run on hope.
One more thing. We got to do this quickly because I want to get to your story about Mayo. Mayo also mentioned these ownership debriefings with Curran. What was your reaction to that?
Didn't surprise me. And it to me, it explained that weird press conference after the Titans game where Jerod Mayo came out, and I think it was the second sentence, he talked about the decision to go for 2 and how some people might disagree, where it wasn't even on my radar in the moment. I just thought, I was just amazed with what Drake May did going down the field, pulling that play out of his rear end. I didn't even mind. I meant more. I was more worried about, over the overtime pick and then the decision to go for 2. But at the time I said, I wonder if the Crafts asked Jerod Mayo why he didn't go for 2. And to me, that sort of answers the question.
All right. We're going to get into Greg's magnum opus on Jerod Mayo. But before we get to that, Greg's going to tell you about Game Time.
Game Time, I love going to the app. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get seat views, panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, which is a must for me. I was just looking it up. The Chargers game, first of all, you can get in, I think, all in anywhere for about $52. I saw a deal. You could sit in the lower bowl. There were great seats, sort of right in front of the red seats. You could sit in the lower bowl for $163 all in if you want to get a look at Drake May and also Justin Herbert. I just used Game Time to get concert tickets for my wife and I during the bye week. She's still talking about it. We had a great time. Thanks to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
All right. How I'm going to handle this is hopefully the right way to handle this because there is a lot in this story. So I want to read through some of the story, most of the story, and I'm just going to get your reaction, Greg. You can stop me when you want to stop me, or I'll stop myself and ask you a question. Again, I urge people to read the entire story. Greg writes about Jerod Mayo. The Crafts expected a little bit of a bump this season. You mentioned, that most people inside the building agreed that there would be a bit of a bump, thinking that the Patriots, hey, you stay the same on defense, better quarterback, turnover differential better, Joey Sly, Mayo getting the players to buy into his vision, and the better environment. And so the thought was the Patriots would take a step forward this year. Obviously, to this point, that has not happened. Greg writes, the chances are likely that Mayo returns, but there are organizational sources who believe he needs to keep the team competitive in the final 4 games. Greg, what is your definition of competitive?
I think I would say a majority. I think they just need to play tough. It's hard for me to put a definition on it. They definitely need to be competitive with the Cardinals. I'm not saying they need to win any of the 4 games, but if they can, go down to the wire with the Cardinals, do well against the Bills on the road, get into the fourth quarter. Remember, Belichick and Mac Jones beat the Bills last season. The Chargers at home, just make it a game. And I don't think that's a Chargers team that's going to run away from anybody. They're offensively challenged. I don't see why that should be an issue. And then the Bills, we don't know what they're playing for in the last week of the season. I just think they need to come out of the bye. They've gotten to reset, rest up. They just need to they need to look like a competent unit and be competitive.
Back to Greg's story. According to multiple sources, if Kraft comes to the realization, and this is the line that I ganked and posted on Twitter, according to multiple sources, if Kraft comes to the realization he made the wrong choice with Mayo, he would not, I stress, would not hesitate to rectify the situation. So, Greg, the thoughts that, hey, man, Kraft put Mayo there. Owners don't like to be wrong. If he fires Mayo after year one, it's egg on Kraft's face. You say fans should not necessarily be too concerned about that.
Yes. However, I think that I don't think it's tough for us to realize that Robert is sentimental, to say the least, when it comes to certain things. I know this is something that I've heard for multiple months, that Robert, if he deems this to be a mistake, and I don't know whether it's risen to that level at this point. I don't think it has. But again, this is why the final 4 games are important. I mean, if they go out losing, I think would it be 6 in a row? No, it would be 7 in a row that they would lose. Yeah, they lost 6 in a row early on in the season. This would be 7 straight games to finish the season. 3-14, worst record since Dick McPherson in 1992. Their point differential could be along those same lines. It could be worse than last year if this final 4 games go poorly. I know people believe that that's the case, that Robert would not hesitate. In actuality, would he actually pull the plug? I think that's where, and I understand there are people who have a hard time seeing that, and quite frankly, so do I. But that's why a lot of it depends on how these final 4 games. I mean, if they're getting if they get their doors blown off in the final 4 weeks, and they've lost 7 straight to finish the year, it could get into that territory. I don't think it's close to that right now, but it could get there.
One of the questions I got on Twitter was like, why now? It took them this long to figure this out. Like now they're worried about Mayo. Not necessarily. Greg writes about this in his story. He says, doubt about Mayo's staying power did not just come on in the past few weeks. During the offseason, ownership had some concerns that Mayo was in over his head and not focused on the right things to build a football program. Add to that, Greg.
Yeah, I think you're talking about an ownership group that inherited Bill Parcells, that hired Pete Carroll, that hired Bill Belichick. These are guys who were all former head coaches before they were coaches here. They had a history of being successful coordinators in the NFL, and they all three, even though you could argue with Carroll how successful he was here, but there's no question that they had a vision and they knew what they wanted, and they also had football acumen in terms of being able to get the team in the best position to win each week. And I think that aspect for Mayo has been underwhelming to the Crafts. I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. Those 3 coaches, they're all going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So they know what it looks like. They know how they've operated. They know how they got to, be successful. Parcells and Belichick, we know about. Pete Carroll, he was around 500 in his 3 years here. You could understand that if Jerod Mayo didn't come with the forethought, the vision of his football program, that it wouldn't take the Crafts long to be like, wait a minute, this is not like we've seen before. And right. I don't know if this is going to be successful for us.
More on the idea of the Crafts being alarmed. Greg, you said it really started to kick in when the team started at 1-6. And then you explained that, I think you touched on this a little bit in a prior podcast, but this idea that the Kraft started to kind of dig in to what went wrong last year in the building and what was Mayo's role within the fracture of that program. And certainly you can add more detail to that. But my question is, why did that not happen before officially naming Jerod Mayo the head coach of the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I think they were more preoccupied with the end game with Bill. And that's, to me, it's understandable. But, I mean, because we're talking about just almost an otherworldly presence in terms of Bill and success, and how he's going to be the greatest coach of all time. And like, I think they were more preoccupied with the elegant solution at the end and parting ways with Bill, and maybe even a little bit can this be repaired? Can they get the train on the tracks if they do X, Y, and Z? And so I don't think they really delved into what was going on inside the building. And I do think those communications, where, I'm not going to call them calls, I'm not going to call them meetings, I'm going to just say communications, which Mike Giardi also had really good reporting on BSJ the day before to talk about, like, that Jonathan, there are NFL people that believe Jonathan was at the heart of a lot of these communications, as far as the direction of the team, and it not only included, it was reported at the time by Bert that they were having communications about how's the best way to support a young quarterback. That wasn't just what the communications was about. It was about, yes, it was about May, but it was also about Mayo. It was also about doing a little bit of background on Mayo, because I think they had heard some rumblings about, his role on the coaching staff in the previous year or two.
Right.
Can Mayo be, they were doing some research on, can Mayo be successful? How can they help him, which I think will be their preference going forward, is to retain Mayo. And how do they better support him, that they failed him a little bit in that regard. And so those communications were all encompassing. It wasn't just about Drake May.
You then mentioned, Greg, that, the situation the Patriots are currently in, you've got Drake May, a top 3 pick, hopefully, certainly looks like a top 5 pick, fingers crossed, a bunch of cap space, the new football ops building that is going to become an actual thing that exists by 2026. You think that the New England job, if the Crafts actually made the move and said goodbye to Mayo, that this Patriots gig would be, according to you, by far the most attractive job out there, which leads us to, if you move on from Mayo, what would you do? And I think a lot of people are thinking of the same guy. It's a guy that you bring up, and that's Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, I think that especially Jonathan thinks a lot about it, and I think you can probably pull quotes. I remember him commenting on Vrabel as a head coach. I don't know if it was around the Hall of Fame thing or whatnot, but everyone knows Mike Vrabel is an excellent coach. He's an excellent tactician. You could certainly quibble with if you want to put the personnel choices in Tennessee on him, even though whether it was Robinson or the guy that's there now, Rand Carthon, they were in charge of personnel, and also his offensive approach, and that's fine. But I think that if there wasn't a Mike, because we all know that Vrabel was available at this time last year, and you're just like, how do you not talk to him? How do you just promote Jerod Mayo? And okay, they wanted to honor their word to Jerod Mayo. And they probably figured at that point in time, well, we lost our opportunity from Vrabel, and we'll have to see if it bites us in the butt. And then all of a sudden, he's still out there, and he's available again in year 2, and you're staring at it, and you're saying, like, I mean, you really have to answer the question, like, do you think Jerod Mayo is going to be a good coach? Do you think coaches develop over time and become good coaches? Because if there's any doubt about that, if there's a lot of doubt about that, Mike Vrabel is plug and play, and he understands the environment. He understands the crafts. He understands all that. And And plus the specter of he could land with the New York Jets and he could be there twice a year for how long and, rub his butt in your face every time he plays the Jets. I mean, I do think that complicates the situation. And again, I do think, and this is the premise of the whole article, Mayo needs to have he needs to have a good, solid close to the season.
Read the piece. It's great work by Greg. There's just a lot of stuff in there. The one thing about Vrabel I'll say before we move on quickly is that, the one question about Vrabel and his personnel, does he want a say in personnel? How heavy-handed does he want that say to be? What do you do with the front office? Is Elliott Wolf still here, or do you clean house? And does Vrabel choose the GM that he wants to work with? And if that's the case, then the power structure is already off from the very beginning because now Vrabel has more power than the GM. Is that what you want? There are some legitimate questions if Vrabel is the guy they look at if they make the move and get rid of Mayo. Again, read the full piece. It's great work. All right, before we say goodbye, quickly, I want to tell all of you that Boston Sports Journal has a holiday special going on right now. $10 off annual subscriptions to BSJ with promo code HOLIDAYS. Again, that's promo code HOLIDAYS. And this deal goes through December 31st. So check them out. $10 off. And it's $50 for a subscription, by the way, which is a really good price. And with this holiday, especially now talking about $40. Meanwhile, Prize Picks, CLNS, that code, all about it. $50 instantly when you play $5. And also CLNS is the code for Game Time. You can get $20 off your first purchase by using that code CLNS. All right, Greg, before you say goodbye to us, to visit Felger and Maz, 3 things you like, 3 things you dislike for the season up until now.
Yeah, why don't we put that off till later in the week, because I got to tell people about my guys at Naturno. When it comes to keeping my home comfortable this winter, there's nothing more important than having a reliable team to handle things like heating, cooling, and plumbing. That's why I'm so glad I worked with Naturno Home Services. These guys are local, they are family-owned and family-focused, and have been servicing the greater Boston area for 15 years. Listen to this, Nick. This is unbelievable. So my heating system was going out. I needed a new boiler. I got Naturno to come out. Their site inspection guy was there on a Monday. We didn't have any heat upstairs. It was like 53 degrees upstairs. Oof. It was 20 degrees outside. The installation wasn't going to happen till Thursday. I asked them to take a look at it. He said, yeah, sure, no problem. Realized there was a valve that had failed on my failing boiler. And now with the prospect of no heat until Thursday when they put the new boiler in, guess what they did? They put in a new valve free of charge to make sure that I had heat until the installation. I mean, who does that? I mean, I could tell you Naturno does that. I was blown away by that. That's the kind of service that just doesn't happen every day. They were on time, professional, made the entire process stress-free. I couldn't have asked for a better experience. Naturno isn't just about heating. They're my go-to for plumbing, cooling, even water and air quality solutions. They've got the expertise to handle whatever your home needs. Here's the best part. You can get 10% off your next service with Naturno. That could save you up to $1,000 on your next project. Just visit naturnohome.com/Bedard. That's NOTTURNO home.com/Bedard for details and conditions. Take advantage now before the end of the year. These deals won't last forever. Trust me, having a team like Naturno Home Services in your corner makes all the difference, whether you need a quick repair or a major installation. They'll get the job done right. Check them out today.
I love Naturno, but we can't end on a read. So can we at least give one thing we like and one thing we dislike, Greg, from you?
Yeah. Let's so far this season, obviously, Drake May, Keon White. I know people have been complaining about him, about he hasn't been out there. I think, he's been serving a role. He's still got the most pressure on the team in the last game. I've just been fine with Keon White this year. Christian Gonzalez, I think, has been really good. Things that I'm disappointed about, the payoff in free agency, which we talked about, which was nil. That's a huge disappointment for me. I figured Elliott Wolf and those guys in the front office, they're veterans, as opposed to a lot of people on the staff. They've been through it before. They were ready for their jobs. And that's been a disappointment for me, certainly. I think that what else? I had a couple other things.
Covington?
I mean, yeah, you could say DeMarcus Covington, but I think my bigger disappointment, which was what I was going to mention, it's related to this, is Jerod Mayo. I just don't think he's been very good. And the biggest indictment to me is the defense on the huge regression. And you could talk about like last season, maybe they're overrated. That's why I like to look at DVOA, because it takes a lot of things into account that raw stats don't. And the Patriots had a ton of injuries last year, including in their secondary. And they still found a way to get it done. And that Mayo hasn't taken ownership of that and at some point tried to make that group better, to be like, look, dude, I'm a defensive head coach. My defense needs to be better. To me has been a problem. And, and I'll also go with, of late, Ramondre Stevenson. We've talked about it before. In the last 3 games, he just hasn't been the same player. I don't know what's up with him. In the first 8 games that he played, he was really good, graded out really well for me. In the last 3, it's been really bad. I don't know if he's hurt or just lacks confidence, but they need to figure out the way to get the big bowling ball going.
He's Greg. I'm Nick. Coming up later this week, we'll preview the Cardinals game on Sunday. Till then, everybody be well.